Welcome to this video about authentication in Blazor server. In this tutorial I will show you how we can authenticate our users with their Microsoft accounts. Let's start in the startup class. We have to add the authentication and here set the name of the default scheme to cookies. The default scheme, as the name suggests, is the default scheme for all schemes, so the default signing, default challenge, default sign out scheme, all will be the cookie scheme. Here I'm adding this scheme because by default the name of the cookie here is cookies. Here I'm changing the name to auth cookie. That's it already. Now I have to first install a library which allows us to do the authentication over Microsoft. It's just type in a Microsoft account. So what is this library or package doing? It has middleware components and to these middleware components we will be redirected. So that's the framework is doing this for us, and then we can just specify the scheme which we want the user to be signed in. And this scheme, of course, is the cookies scheme. So here I'm specifying the sign-in scheme to cookies. Now here I also have to provide the client ID and the client secret. And how are we going to retrieve these values? Because we have a configuration object, we have this because of the dependency injection here. We can just go in the Microsoft section and then retrieve the ID. Of course, for this to work, we first have to configure the app settings file as such, and here the secret. So I go to the app settings file. Now here I'm adding the new section, Microsoft ID, and here the secret. You have to enclose them in curly brackets. Now I will copy in here the credentials that you get when you register your application over Azure. Of course, I will not show you them. I have a link in the description which explains it in great detail how you have to configure Azure to work. So how you have to set it up in Azure. It's not that complicated. You just have to retrieve the ID and the secret from there, and you have to register the redirect URI, and this redirect URI will be called the middleware that we have installed with this package will listening on this URI, and then log the user in. And so that this middleware is working, we have to call use authentication and then use authorization, so that we later can authorize our component, so that everybody is getting, so that only the people that are signed in with their Microsoft account can see the component. Now, because somehow we want to redirect the user to Microsoft, we have to create a controller. Therefore, I have to make them routable at first. So here I'm adding a new controller. I call it login controller. Delete the API so that the route is a bit more shorter. Now here I'm giving it another over the attribute. I make this action routable when the user has the URI with login, because here that's a token for the controller, and then followed by the Microsoft. Here I'm returning an action result because we are going to redirect the user. Here just call it login. Now over the query string, I also want to I expect a redirect URI. Here I am creating the authentication properties, object initializer, and then setting the redirect URI. And then I'm returning the challenge, not the redirect. I'm returning the challenge, which will redirect the user to Microsoft's authentication server. So this is just a constant defined in this class that we've installed, which evaluates to Microsoft. So we could have just typed it out. These authentication properties, these will not be used by Microsoft. These will be used by the middleware that is listening on the path localhost /signin.microsoft. And when this middleware that we have registered has signed the user in, it will redirect him or she to this URI. Then, of course, we also have to make an action which logs the user out. Call it here logout. Here I can just sign the user out, and because we have defined our default scheme as cookies, the default sign out scheme is also cookies, so we don't have to specify it further. And then I'm returning just a redirect to the front page, so that okay, great. Now I have to go into app component here, enclose everything with the cascading authentication state component so that we can use the authorize view. And in here, I have also changed the route view to authorize route view so that we can use the authorize attribute on a route level. And this is needed for this. So the fetch data component, which is accessible over this route, will be the only component that that expects the user to be authenticated. So we call here attribute and then authorize. And because the default scheme is cookies, we don't have to specify it further. And when we don't specify a policy, it just, if the default scheme is authenticated, then the user is authorized. And so that's exactly the thing we want to do. Then in the main layout, I want to give the user the possibility to log in, of course. So here I'm using the authorize view. Then if the user is authorized, we will display his or her user, and then here there's a method find first. Here I can give the claim type, claim types dot name, and then I'm just taking the value of the found claim. Now it doesn't have the namespace here. What is it? Microsoft or system security.claims. And here I also give the button to log out. I style it with Bootstrap, therefore I'm giving the class danger so that it's red. And the href is pointing to our created controller, login, logout. Of course, the naming is not perfect, but this the action with the name logout in the controller, name login, but yeah, you get the point. And if the user is not authorized, then there is a login button which will log in with Microsoft, which will direct him to the controller then that then will direct him or she to the Microsoft page. Now, what was the route again? Login, Microsoft, and then here we have the query parameter redirect, URI equals fetch data. So whenever we are getting logged in, we redirect the user automatically to fetch data because that's the only component that expects the user to be authenticated. Yeah, you can argue just an example. I think that's already it. So let's have a look. Okay, so the application loads. Now I go to fetch data. We are not authorized. Log in with Microsoft. Okay, have to. Okay, now I'm logged in. We see the redirect happen to the fetch data component. Yeah, because it's a component we want to secure. I just can navigate as normal, make the logout. Now the workflow that you have seen now is when the user is not logged in with Microsoft already. When the user is logged in with Microsoft, we shouldn't. Yes, exactly. As you would expect, you're just logged in now. Yeah. Thank you very much for your attention.